the decorations in the house, which are for the most part, consist of fresh greens and fresh fruit, really still are a carryover from certainly the latter part of the 18th century.
Happy holidays! This time on the river, we visit the David Crawford Mansion in Newburgh with Tom Kyle of the organization that's trying to recapture the period of the 1830s when the mansion was built. And we'll find out how the Crawford family spent its holiday season when we come back right here on the river. The holiday season. Many of us have prepared our homes for the many festivities during this holiday. But did you ever wonder about how the folks did it in the old days? How about in particular the David Crawford Mansion in Newburgh? But first, some background. Tom Kyle, director of the Historical Society of Newburgh Bay and Highlands, says it was built in 1834 by a ship merchant.
The house came about for this reason, that the man who built it was named David Crawford. David Crawford and his father, Francis, were in business on Newburgh's waterfront. They made their money because they owned ships, warehouses, and wharves. And what happened is Newburgh, in that early part of the century, was a very important river port. And the produce from the west, which is now called Broadway, that was formerly called Western Avenue, and that connected to the Coshocton Turnpike, which brought raw goods, produce into Newburgh to be put onto the ships on the river that went both north to the Albany markets and south to the New York markets. So that Mr. Crawford had very much his fingers on the goods coming into the city and how they were transported to the various markets. In 1830, his father is recently deceased and left David his share of the business. So David at that point is very wealthy. He's certainly a self-made man, and he builds this very rich house overlooking the river. And it is not only very rich on the outside, but obviously very rich on the inside, and reflects certainly the best of that particular period in terms of architectural detailing, and certainly the mantels, the brass fittings on the fireplaces is really the very best that you could buy at that point.
It is believed that David Crawford designed his house after a mansion in New York City.
He, as a young man, went into the military and was a captain during the War of 1812 and stationed in New York City. And actually this house, we believe to be based on a very famous house in New York City, the Morris Jumel House. And I'm sure David Crawford, being in New York, was familiar with that house. And when he came back, he built a model of that particular type of architecture, which is Italian Palladian. Actually, in terms of date, the house is retardataire. And that's why many people sort of find it a little bit strange, because of course it has a very strong pediment and four very strong columns across it, and really doesn't relate very much to the Greek revival period of that point of 1830. We do know, because we found an inventory from David Crawford's estate when he dies in 1856, we know, for instance, the room usage, and we know what type of furniture and what kind of decorative objects there were in each room. So we know a great deal about how the Crawfords lived in this house. We know that there was a great deal of silver and cut American glass. We know that the furniture was mahogany and rosewood. We know that the floors were carpeted with English Wilton and Brussels carpet. We know that in about 1852, the house was piped for gas, interior gas, and that gas chandeliers were put in at that time. So it was a very rich lifestyle. We know, excuse me, for instance, that there was a barn on the property with a number of carriages and horses, sleighs, so that we know quite a bit about how the family lived.
There are very few original items used by the Crawford family still left in the mansion.
Unfortunately, when David Crawford's widow died in 1886, there were only granddaughters, and what happened is at that point the house went out of the family possession, and the furniture, the decorative objects went out of the house. So that when the society took possession of the house in 1953, there was almost nothing inside from the original family's living, and unfortunately we haven't been able to trace much of it back. It was dispersed too long ago to really be able to trace it back. The only thing we really have in this room is a tea urn, hot water urn, that had remained in the city, and ultimately the group that got it gave it back to us, and that's on the sideboard. So that's about the only thing. Certainly the silver on this dining table is silver made in Newburgh itself. The city in the early 19th century had a number of very good craftsmen, and there was quite a bit of silver made in the city, so this is silver from Newburgh.
If it wasn't for a group of concerned citizens, Tom says the house might not be here today.
In the early 20th century, a family who were musicians came up from New York and bought the house. Their name was Diedrich. They lived in the house for the greater share of the first half of the 20th century until 1953, when the last member of that family was deceased. There was a fear in the community that the house would be taken for a parking lot, which would work as an adjacent lot for a funeral business on Grand Street. And because the back half of this property, the western half of this property, had been subdivided in the latter part of the 19th century, this particular house on that street had an access through the back of the property. So what happened is a group of citizens in the city who were also members of the society got together and bought the house and then turned it over to the society. So it's been the society's headquarters since that point.
And how did the river influence the location of the mansion?
The house is on a nice sort of steep sort of incline here as it looks down on the river, and certainly David Crawford in the early 19th century, before this other side of the street was built, the houses were built on that side, certainly could look down on his own warehouses and wharves, ships. So this house really has a great deal to do with the river. Not only certainly the site was selected because of its view of the river, and as the money that built it came from the river too.
Tom says the Crawfords were not alone in wanting a home with a view of the river.
In earlier times, often merchants lived near or sometimes even directly above their businesses. As certain merchants became very affluent, they were able to move away from that very for instance, our waterfront here was very tightly built up. It was very tight. And at a certain point, David Crawford certainly was able to get away from that kind of tight commercial part of the city and move up here and build this house, which then overlooked the whole river industry. So yes, we find in this city that in the 1830s and the 40s, the prosperous merchants begin to build up higher than the old commercial area, but they're still able to have a good view of it.
And the paintings in the house pertain to the river.
We know, for instance, that this house had quite a good collection of paintings in the 19th century. And I would assume that the paintings originally in the house had something to do with the river. And so what we have in the house now is we have paintings by a couple Newburgh artists. which actually those paintings also deal with the river. River views looking down the river towards Popolo, Bannerman's Island, and West Point. So that there are a group of paintings in the house which really are very much part of that Hudson River Valley School.
Tom says the intricate architectural designs continue throughout the house.
The rooms upstairs, there are 4 bedrooms. The 2 bedrooms, what we would call the northeast bedroom and the southeast bedroom, were the formal master bedrooms in the house. And the 2 smaller rooms in the back were certainly, I'm sure, for the children. There were just 2 children in this house. But that was the bedroom floor. One of the interesting things about the second floor in this house, even though it was a bedroom floor, and usually one finds in American homes that when you get to the bedroom floor, the detailing gets very simple, we find that didn't happen in this house, that even on the second floor of the house here, we still find very rich architectural detailing around the doors and the windows. And we still find plaster cornice work on the ceiling.
Slowly, the society is accumulating items for the mansion that can be associated with the Crawford family.
There's a Chinese suite of furniture which consists of 2 sofas and 2 chairs, and they were made in China for the Western market, and they were specifically ordered for a particular family the family who lived in Newburgh, and those objects then ultimately came to the society. They're made about 1850. Other furniture on the second floor, some of those objects will be used in a bedroom that's going to be put in upstairs. The dolls certainly are dolls that have had Newburgh histories, in the sense that they've been used by other children living in Newburgh, and that they've come to the society in that way. And certainly I'm sure there were toys in this house originally, so that's how they would relate to this house. The ships upstairs, the scale model steamboats, and sloops, they have a very interesting history. Certainly they relate to, they're ships that particularly relate to Newburgh. They were either ships that were owned by Newburgh merchants, or they were ships that of course the important ships all stopped in Newburgh in the 19th century, because this was a very important river city. And so that the boats relate very much to the city up there. That they came into the society in the 1950s, having been made by a gentleman who had a great deal of time on his hands and was able to research very carefully those ships, and so they're very accurate in terms of details. And the society obviously is very interested in steamboats and in the story that they tell about transportation on the Hudson.
David Crawford had some friends who were also in the same line of business.
The Powells were like David, that the Powell family was very much like the Crawfords in the sense that they had made their money from transportation and a great deal from river transportation. The 2 families were very closely associated, and in fact, when David Crawford retires from business here in the city, he sells his business interest to the Powells and the Ramstells. And one of the benefactors of this society was a woman who carried on the name Mary Powell, and the bedroom that will be upstairs will be named in her honor. So it very much does, connect, it acts as a bridge to that whole transportation story.
Included upstairs is a collection of old books.
The society, as you know, has a very good reference library, history reference library of local and area New York State history. And in that library, we're very fortunate to have books which belong to one of the early governors of New York State, George Clinton. And those books date from 1743, when Mr. Clinton actually lived in this area. He lived just south of here in New Windsor. And so George Clinton is very much of local prominence. In fact, the street which this house borders north on is called Clinton Street. So we obviously, the Society has great interest in the Clintons and their role in this city and in New York State.
The Crawford Mansion sets today on 1 acre of land. Tom says its architecture is very unusual for a 19th century building.
Looking at the facade of the house and it certainly gives us a very good idea of the drama I think that David Crawford wanted in his house. Certainly in choosing the Palladian style of architecture with this great projecting portico with a Palladian window at the top, and then the portico supported by these 4 large columns. On the second floor, you'll see that there's a balcony, and that balcony can be entered in through the second floor hallway. So it makes for a very dramatic facade. And I'm sure that as you see it at the holidays, I'm sure that at other times, certainly probably in patriotic occasion, I'm sure that balcony and the columns got decorated. So it makes for a very dramatic house. They're absolutely original windows, and actually most of the original glass in the windows is still there, which is quite amazing. And particularly when you look from the inside looking out, you can see the irregularities in the glass.
Now we get around to the holidays. In the 19th century, homes were decorated for these holidays with natural ornaments.
The decorations in the house, which are for the most part, consist of fresh greens and fresh fruit, really still are a carryover from certainly the latter part of the 18th century. And we know because of documentations and how the Americans, let's say in the 1830s, celebrated the holidays, we know pretty much how it was done. There's a recent publication out which helped us a great deal in terms of what kind of food was served, how the decorations were arranged, how the tables were done, so that we know a great deal. Certainly the Christmas tree and certainly the German tradition of celebrating Christmas doesn't come into the United States until really the 1850s, so that the Christmas that we usually think of as being really the only traditional Christmas really is rather late coming into this country. When this house is built, it's really a certain simple type of decoration is used.
Tom says the Crawfords' Christmas feast would be quite different than what we would have today.
It would be a number of courses. There would be a number of meat dishes served, vegetables, oysters. There was a certain amount of oysters and fish eaten. We have the table set today for the dessert course, which would have included fruits and wines, and certain Madeira, probably Madeira, port, wines. Not many artificial sweets. It was a very, very natural food. In the house, you'll see pineapples used because in the interior architectural details that you will find carved pineapples, and the pineapple, as you know, is a symbol for hospitality. And so at Christmas time, the pineapples come out, and we use them in relation to the architectural detailing of the house. Not only in the 18th century, but in the 19th century, still the pineapple was a symbol of hospitality. It was obviously an exotic imported fruit that had to be imported. And certainly people that came into the house and had something like a pineapple were obviously good friends.
And Tom tells us now how he thinks the Crawfords might have spent their Christmas day.
I think they would probably wake up with presents. I think that that certainly there was a very close family relationship there. We know that Mr. Crawford was very tall and very handsome, and like Shakespeare, and I suspect probably would even read to the family that day. We know he was a very dramatic man, very imposing, and I think that certainly part of it would be receiving presents, and then just certainly probably there were guests coming into the house, because as we know, and as we mentioned, the family entertained very lavishly in the house. So I would think it was probably a day of business associates and friends coming to visit the Crawfords and being entertained.
Tom says he has great hopes of continuing with the restorations of the Crawford Mansion.
We have many plans to continue to refurbish the house. Our problem always is that it's got to be richly done, and that means today that it has to be, the carpets have to be woven in England, and the furniture has to be probably from New York City, and it has to be mahogany, it has to be formal, and it's unfortunately gotten expensive in the last few years. So that really is the plan, is to continually to furnish the house and do a very good job interpreting the house for our visitors that come.
And how will the society pay for these renovations?
The society, which is a nonprofit organization, corporation, with a board of directors, they have to rely on certainly a little admissions money, certainly society membership. We apply and get grants from New York State, from the New York State Council of the Arts, and from other federal funding agencies. So we have been, actually lately, we have been very fortunate to get certain grants that help us do things here in the house, and certainly do certain types of programming that we couldn't otherwise get. We get corporate support, and actually one of the local banking institutions give us programming money for our Christmas events.
Tom Kyle says he's originally from upstate New York, and he's always been interested in old houses.
I've been here 10 years. Am interested in old houses and restoration, preservation work, and that's how I got into Newburgh. And then ultimately I got involved with the society. The 19th century is really a period that I'm interested in. So really that's probably my strong ties with the house and the society.
The 1834 David Crawford Mansion. It sits with great splendor on top of a hill in Newburgh. Tom says now and throughout the holiday season, it will be open to the public, and you are welcome.
The house is open on a regular basis, Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 4, and the house will be open for visitors. And certainly it's one of the best times to visit us because, of course, the house is very richly decorated for the holidays.
Thanks for coming aboard this time. And now as we leave you, let's enjoy the winning entries in the Hudson River Maritime Center's first annual Children's Art Contest. The theme, A Hudson River Christmas. Now let's take another look at these drawings. This time we'll tell you who put them together. First prize going to Jeremy Newkirk from the 4th grade at the Cahill School. Another first prize went to Leona McCarthy of grade 2, School of the New Moon. Honorable mentions went to Rachel Bloom of the 2nd grade at the Kingston Catholic School, and to Eden Gale Hall of the Good Shepherd School, 5th grade. Abby Green drew the Clearwater. She's in the 4th grade at the Meyer School, honorable mention. Liv Leader of the 1st grade, School of the New Moon, honorable mention. And finally, Philippe Nab of the 2nd grade, School of the New Moon, this little tugboat. Again, happy holidays.